She was denied entry to the cockpit. Security rules. No exceptions. But when the captain suddenly collapsed at 160 miles per hour during takeoff, with 143 passengers screaming toward disaster, those same rules shattered. The woman they refused was their only hope. A master pilot sitting helplessly in the back. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The morning started like any other at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Passengers hurried through security. Coffee shops were busy. Flight announcements echoed through the terminals. Nobody knew that Flight 392 to Miami would become one of the most talked about flights in aviation history. Among the crowd of travelers was Captain Lisa Martinez. She wore jeans and a simple blue sweater. Her hair was tied back. She carried a small backpack. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was one of the most experienced pilots in the country. She had over 12,000 flight hours. She had flown everything from small planes to large commercial jets. Today, she was just another passenger. Lisa was traveling to Miami for her son's wedding. She had taken time off from her job as a senior captain with a major airline. She wanted to relax and enjoy the flight. For once, someone else would be in control. She could sit back and not worry about weather reports, fuel calculations, or emergency procedures. She walked to gate B15 where Flight 392 was boarding. The gate agent called for families with small children. Then business class passengers. Finally, economy class began boarding. Lisa waited patiently in line. She handed her boarding pass to the agent and walked down the jetway. As she entered the plane, she noticed the cockpit door was open. She could see the two pilots inside. They were doing their pre-flight checks. Their hands moved across switches and buttons. She smiled. She knew exactly what they were doing. She had done it thousands of times herself. A flight attendant named Karen greeted passengers at the door. She had bright red hair and a friendly smile. "Welcome aboard," she said to each person. Lisa nodded and started to walk past. Then she stopped. "Excuse me," Lisa said quietly. "I'm a pilot myself. I was wondering if I could say hello to the crew before we take off." Karen's smile became stiff. Her eyes changed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Cockpit access is not allowed. Security regulations. No exceptions." Lisa understood immediately. After September 11, 2001, everything had changed. The cockpit door stayed locked. No visitors. No exceptions. Even pilots traveling as passengers usually couldn't visit anymore. "Of course," Lisa said. "I completely understand. Sorry for asking." She walked down the aisle to her seat, 14C. A middle seat. Not her favorite, but it didn't matter. She wasn't working today. She settled in and pulled out a book. The passenger next to her, a young man in a business suit, glanced at her briefly before returning to his phone. The plane filled up quickly. Overhead bins slammed shut. Parents tried to calm crying babies. Business travelers typed on laptops. Tourists chatted excitedly about their Miami vacation. Lisa looked around and smiled. She loved flying, even as a passenger. The captain's voice came through the speakers. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain James Richardson. With me today is First Officer Mike Chen. We're looking at a flight time of about 2 hours and 40 minutes to Miami. Weather looks good. We should have a smooth flight. Sit back, relax, and enjoy." Lisa recognized the calm, confident voice. That was how captains should sound. Reassuring. Professional. She felt comfortable knowing experienced pilots were up front. The plane pushed back from the gate. The engine started with a familiar whine. Lisa felt the gentle movement as the plane began taxiing toward the runway. She knew every sound, every sensation. The turn onto the taxiway. The slight bounce over uneven pavement. The wait in line behind other departing aircraft. Finally, they reached the runway. The plane turned and lined up. There was a brief pause. Then the engines roared to full power. The acceleration pushed Lisa back into her seat. The runway lights flashed past faster and faster. She felt the familiar sensation of speed building. She knew the takeoff sequence by heart. At around 150 miles per hour, the pilot would pull back on the controls. The nose would lift. A few seconds later, the main wheels would leave the ground. They would be flying. The speed built. 100 miles per hour. 120, 140. Lisa waited for the rotation. But it didn't come. They were still accelerating. Still on the ground. The runway was disappearing beneath them. Something was wrong. In the cockpit, First Officer Mike Chen was experiencing every pilot's worst nightmare. They had just reached rotation speed. Captain Richardson had reached for the control wheel. Then he gasped. His hand fell away. His entire body went limp. He collapsed forward against his seatbelt. "Captain!" Mike shouted. No response. Richardson was unconscious. They were traveling at 160 miles per hour. The end of the runway was approaching fast. Mike had to make a split-second decision. Try to stop. Impossible. They were going too fast. Continue the takeoff. That was the only option. His hands grabbed the controls. He pulled back. The nose lifted off the runway. Not as smoothly as it should have. A few seconds late. But they were rotating. The main wheels lifted off with maybe 1,500 feet of runway remaining. They were airborne. But Mike's problems were just beginning. He was alone. The captain was unconscious beside him. He had to fly the plane, talk to air traffic control, and figure out what to do about the medical emergency. All at the same time. His hands shook on the controls. His heart pounded. He had never been so scared in his life. Chicago Tower, Flight 392 Heavy. We have an emergency. Captain is unconscious. Requesting immediate assistance. The tower controller's voice came back instantly. Flight 392, Roger. You're cleared to climb to 5,000 feet. Do you need to return to the airport? Affirmative. We need to come back. Get medical ready. In the cabin, most passengers hadn't noticed anything unusual. The takeoff had been a bit rough, but nothing alarming. They settled in, pulling out books and tablets. Some closed their eyes to nap. But Lisa knew. She had felt the late rotation. She knew they had stayed on the ground too long. Something was wrong. Very wrong. She watched the flight attendants. Karen was hurrying toward the front of the plane. Her face was pale. She picked up the intercom phone and listened. Her expression changed to shock. She hung up and rushed to the cockpit door. Lisa unbuckled her seatbelt. She stood up. Several passengers looked at her in surprise. The seatbelt sign was still on. "Excuse me," Lisa said, squeezing past the man in the aisle seat. She walked quickly toward the front. Karen was at the cockpit door, speaking urgently into the intercom. Lisa reached her. "What's happening?" Lisa asked. Karen turned, annoyed. "Ma'am, please return to your seat. The seatbelt sign is on." "I'm Captain Lisa Martinez," Lisa said firmly. "I have 12,000 flight hours. I'm a 737 captain. What's the emergency?" Karen's eyes went wide. "The captain collapsed during takeoff. He's unconscious." The first officer is alone up there. Open this door. Now. Karen hesitated for only a second. Then she punched in the emergency code. The lock clicked. Lisa pushed through. The cockpit was small and cramped. Captain Richardson slumped in the left seat, held up only by his seatbelt. His face was gray. First Officer Chen sat rigid in the right seat, both hands gripping the controls. His knuckles were white. Sweat ran down his face. Lisa took in everything instantly. The altitude, 4,200 feet. Airspeed, 220 knots. Heading, they were turning back toward the airport. Engine readings, normal. The young first officer looked terrified but was holding it together. First Officer Chen, I'm Captain Lisa Martinez. I'm a 737 captain. I'm here to help. Keep flying. You're doing great. Mike's head whipped toward her. Relief flooded his face. Thank God. I don't know what to do. He just collapsed. During rotation. I barely got us off the ground. You did exactly right. You got us airborne. That was the hardest part. Now let's work together. We need to get him out of that seat so I can help you fly. Lisa unbuckled Richardson's seatbelt. Karen and another flight attendant helped. They carefully pulled the unconscious captain from his seat and laid him in the aisle just outside the cockpit. Karen immediately began checking his pulse and breathing. He's breathing, but his pulse is weak, Karen reported. Possible heart attack. Lisa slid into the left seat. She adjusted it forward. Her hands found the controls. It felt natural. Like coming home. She scanned the instruments with practiced efficiency. Mike, I'm taking control as pilot flying. You're pilot monitoring. Let's work together. First, talk to me. What's our status? Mike took a shaky breath. Tower cleared us to 5,000 feet. We're turning back to O'Hare. They're clearing the runway and getting emergency services ready. Perfect. What's our fuel? 18,000 pounds. Plenty for landing. Good. What about the aircraft? Any problems besides the captain? No, ma'am. Everything else is normal. All systems are working. Outstanding. You've handled this beautifully so far. Now let's bring her home. Lisa's calm voice and confident manner immediately reduced Mike's panic. He wasn't alone anymore. An experienced captain was in control. His breathing slowed. His hands stopped shaking. Chicago approach, Flight 392. This is Captain Martinez. I'm a qualified 737 captain who was traveling as a passenger. I'm now in the left seat assisting First Officer Chen. Request vectors for immediate return to O'Hare. Captain Richardson is receiving medical attention. We need the longest runway and emergency equipment standing by. Flight 392, Roger. Understand you have a relief captain aboard. Turn left heading 180. Descend and maintain 3,000 feet. Runway 28 right is being cleared for you. Emergency equipment is rolling. How many souls on board and fuel remaining? 167 souls, fuel 18,000 pounds. Lisa flew the airplane smoothly. Her hands moved with practiced precision. She had done this so many times that it was automatic. Beside her, Mike monitored the instruments and handled radio calls. They worked together like they had been a team for years. Cabin crew, this is Captain Martinez speaking from the cockpit, Lisa announced over the PA system. As you may be aware, we're returning to Chicago due to a medical emergency involving one of our pilots. The aircraft is operating perfectly. We will be landing in about 10 minutes. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened and follow all instructions from the flight attendants. Thank you for your patience. Her voice was calm and reassuring. In the cabin, passengers reacted differently. Some looked worried. Others seemed unconcerned. A few whispered to each other, wondering what was happening. But Lisa's confident tone helped keep panic from spreading. The approach controller gave them vectors toward the runway. Lisa programmed the navigation computer. She briefed Mike on the approach. They ran through checklists. Everything was done by the book. Professional. Smooth. Flaps 15, Lisa called. Mike moved the flap lever. Flaps 15, 3 green lights. Landing gear down. Gear down, 3 green lights. They were on final approach now. The runway stretched out ahead of them. Lisa could see the emergency vehicles lined up alongside. Fire trucks. Ambulances. Airport operations vehicles. All waiting for them. 500 feet, Mike called out. Continuing. 400 feet. Continuing. 300 feet. Lisa's hands made tiny adjustments. She was flying manually, not using the autopilot. She wanted complete control for this landing. 200 feet. 100 feet. 50 feet. The main wheels touched the runway so gently that passengers barely felt it. It was a perfect landing. Lisa deployed the speed brakes and applied reverse thrust. The plane slowed rapidly. "Beautiful landing, Captain," Mike said with genuine admiration. Lisa smiled slightly but kept her focus on the rollout. She exited the runway and followed the ground controller's instructions to a parking area near the terminal. Emergency vehicles surrounded them immediately. She set the parking brake and began the shutdown checklist. Mike helped, calling out items. They worked efficiently together. Through the windscreen, Lisa could see paramedics rushing toward the plane with a stretcher. The engines wound down. The cabin was suddenly quiet except for nervous passenger chatter. Lisa remained in the left seat, completing the final shutdown items. She noted everything properly. Fuel remaining. Maintenance issues. Time of landing. Karen appeared in the cockpit doorway. "The paramedics are here. Captain Richardson is still unconscious but breathing." "Good. Make sure they take him straight to the hospital." "And Karen?" Lisa paused. "You did exactly right following those security procedures earlier. Those rules exist for good reasons. You had no way of knowing who I was or that this would happen." Karen's eyes filled with tears. "But if you hadn't been on this flight." "Don't think about that. What matters is everyone is safe. You kept calm and got me into the cockpit when it counted. That's what made the difference." The paramedics loaded Captain Richardson onto the stretcher. They rushed him down the jetway toward the waiting ambulance. His condition looked serious, but at least he was getting help now. Lisa stood and stretched. Mike stood too. He extended his hand. "Captain Martinez, I can never thank you enough. When Captain Richardson collapsed, I thought. I don't know what I thought. I was terrified. But when you sat down in that seat, I knew we'd be okay." Lisa shook his hand firmly. "You saved this airplane, Mike. You got us off the ground under the worst possible circumstances. That took skill and courage. Everything after that was just routine flying. You should be proud of yourself." Mike blinked back tears. I froze for a second. During the rotation. We almost ran out of runway. But you didn't freeze. You made the right decision. You continued the takeoff because stopping was impossible. Then you declared an emergency, contacted the tower, and kept the airplane under control while dealing with a collapsed captain. That's exceptional flying under pressure. Any captain would be proud to fly with you. Airport operations wanted statements from both of them. The FAA would investigate. There would be paperwork. Lots of it. But all of that could wait. First, they helped the other flight attendants get passengers off the plane. Everyone was safe. A bit shaken, perhaps, but safe. Lisa finally walked down the jetway herself. In the terminal, several passengers approached her. "Are you the passenger who flew the plane?" an elderly woman asked. "I helped the first officer, yes." "You saved our lives." "The first officer saved everyone by getting us airborne. I just helped bring us back home." But the woman hugged her anyway. Others thanked her. Some wanted to take pictures. Lisa accepted their gratitude politely but tried to deflect the praise. She was just doing what any pilot would do. The airline provided her with a hotel room. They would put her on a flight to Miami tomorrow. She would still make it to her son's wedding. Just a day late with an incredible story to tell. In her hotel room that night, Lisa sat by the window and looked out at the airport. Planes took off and landed in an endless stream. Thousands of flights every day. Almost all of them completely routine. But occasionally, things went wrong. Equipment failed. Weather turned bad. People got sick. That's why pilots trained so hard. Why they practiced emergency procedures again and again. Why they memorized checklists and studied systems. Because when something went wrong, there was no time to look up answers. You had to know what to do instantly. Lisa thought about the chain of events that had put her in that cockpit. If she had chosen a different flight, Mike would have been alone. If Karen hadn't remembered her request to visit the cockpit, precious time would have been lost finding her. If Captain Richardson had collapsed 5 seconds earlier, during the takeoff roll, they might not have gotten airborne at all. So many small things had to go right. But they had. And 167 people were home with their families tonight because of it. Her phone buzzed. A text message from Mike, "Just heard from the hospital. Captain Richardson is stable. Looks like he'll recover. Thank you again for everything." Lisa smiled and typed back, "Great news. You did an amazing job today. Be proud." Another message came through. This one from the airline's chief pilot, Captain Martinez. "We've reviewed the cockpit voice recorder and flight data. Your actions today were exemplary. The company wants to thank you formally. Also, we're upgrading your ticket to Miami to first class. Least we can do." Lisa laughed softly. First class. That was nice, but it wasn't why she had helped. She had helped because that's what pilots do. They help each other. They work together. When one is in trouble, the others step up. She had been denied access to the cockpit that morning. Turned away at the door. But when her skills were needed, those barriers disappeared. The locked door opened. Security protocols gave way to survival. And she had been ready. That was the real lesson. Always be ready. Because you never know when your skills might be needed. When your experience might make the difference between tragedy and survival. Lisa looked at her reflection in the dark window. She saw a woman in her 40s. Tired. Still wearing the same jeans and sweater from that morning. But also someone who had just saved 167 lives. Not because she was a hero. But because she was trained, experienced, and in the right place at the right moment. Tomorrow she would fly to Miami as a passenger. The pilots wouldn't need her help. The flight would be routine and boring. Perfect. That's exactly how flights should be. And she would sit back, relax, and think about her son's wedding. About dancing with him. About watching him start his new life. But tonight, she felt satisfied. Deeply satisfied. Because when the moment came, she had been ready. And that readiness had made all the difference. 3 weeks later, Lisa received a letter from the FAA. They had completed their investigation of Flight 392. Their conclusion: First Officer Chen had acted properly in an emergency situation. Captain Martinez's assistance had been crucial to the safe outcome. Both were commended for their professionalism. The letter also mentioned that Captain Richardson had made a full recovery. He was back to work, flying again. The doctor said he had suffered a cardiac event brought on by an undiagnosed heart condition. If they hadn't landed when they did, if those paramedics hadn't gotten to him quickly, he might not have survived. Lisa filed the letter away. She didn't need official recognition. She knew what she had done. More importantly, she knew why she had done it. Because she was a pilot. And pilots help people. That's the job. She went to work the next day and flew a routine flight to Seattle. Smooth takeoff. Clear weather. On-time arrival. Exactly the way it should be. Her first officer was a young woman, newly promoted. They worked well together. As they walked through the terminal after landing, the first officer said, "Captain, I heard what you did on that Chicago flight. That was incredible." Lisa smiled. "I just did what needed to be done. Someday, you might find yourself in a similar situation. And you'll do what needs to be done too. That's what we train for. I hope I could be that calm under pressure. You can. When the time comes, your training will take over. Trust it. Trust yourself." They said goodbye in the crew lounge. Lisa drove home. Her son called that evening with pictures from the wedding. She told him the full story of her delayed arrival. He listened with amazement. "Mom, you're incredible," he said. "I'm just a pilot, honey. We all train for emergencies. I was lucky to be there when I was needed. Lucky for those 167 passengers." Yes, Lisa thought. Lucky for them. And lucky for her too. Because she had been able to use her skills to save lives. That's why she had become a pilot in the first place. To fly. To be part of something bigger. To help people get where they needed to go, safely. She looked at her pilot wings sitting on the bookshelf. She had earned those wings through years of hard work. Thousands of hours of study. Countless simulator sessions. Check rides. Evaluations. All preparing her for a career in aviation. But more than that, preparing her for moments like Flight 392. Moments when everything depended on skill, experience, and the ability to stay calm when chaos erupted. The media had tried to make her into a hero. News websites ran stories, passenger pilot saves 167 lives. Hero captain steps up in crisis. Denied cockpit access, she later saved the flight. Lisa declined most interview requests. She released one statement through the airline: "I simply did what any pilot would have done." The real hero is First Officer Chen, who handled an impossible situation with courage and skill. "I was honored to assist him." That was the truth. Mike had saved that airplane by getting it off the ground. Everything after that was just applying training and experience. Important, yes. But Mike had done the hardest part alone. The airline eventually assigned Lisa and Mike to fly together on a route. It was a normal flight. Nothing special. But as they worked together in the cockpit, they shared a bond that few pilots ever experience. They had faced a crisis together. And they had won. After landing, as they walked through the terminal, Mike said, "Captain, I've been thinking about that day a lot. About how close we came. About what could have happened." "Don't," Lisa said gently. "Don't think about what could have happened. Think about what did happen. We worked together. We brought everyone home safely. That's what matters." "I know. But still, thank you. For being on that flight. For being ready. For helping me when I needed it most." Lisa stopped walking and looked at him. "Mike, you're going to have a long career in aviation. Decades of flying ahead of you. You'll face other challenges. Other emergencies. And when those moments come, you'll remember what you did that day. How you kept your head. How you made the right decisions under pressure. And you'll know you can handle anything. He nodded slowly. I hope so. I know so. I've seen what you can do. Trust yourself. They parted ways. Lisa went home. Another day of flying was done. Tomorrow would bring another flight. More passengers counting on her. More responsibility. But that was okay. That was the job she loved. That night, she looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, right now, thousands of aircraft were crossing the sky. Pilots were working. Flight attendants were serving meals. Passengers were sleeping or watching movies, trusting that the crew would get them safely to their destinations. Most of those flights would be routine. Boring, even. And that was perfect. But occasionally, something would go wrong. And when it did, there would be someone ready. Someone trained. Someone experienced. Someone who knew what to do. Lisa had been that someone on Flight 392. She had been denied access to the cockpit right up until the moment when accessing that cockpit became the only thing standing between 167 people and potential disaster. The irony wasn't lost on her. Security protocols had kept her out. Then emergency protocols had let her in. The same locked door that protected everyone had opened when protection required expertise, not barriers. She didn't blame Karen for following the rules. Those rules existed for good reasons. They kept flights safe. But she was grateful that when the rules needed to give way to survival, they had. That flexibility, that ability to adapt in crisis, was just as important as the rules themselves. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Lisa's last thought was simple: tomorrow, she would fly again. She would check the weather. Review the flight plan. Walk around the aircraft. Run through checklists. Do everything the same way she always did. Because consistency created safety. Routine prevented disasters. And being ready, every single time, meant that when the unexpected happened, you were prepared. She wasn't a hero. She was just a pilot. Doing what pilots do. Flying safely. Helping others. Being ready. And that was enough. 6 months passed. Life returned to normal. Lisa flew her regular routes. Mike continued building his career. Captain Richardson made a full recovery and was flying again, though with regular medical checkups and a new appreciation for every flight. Then Lisa received an unexpected invitation. The airline was hosting an awards ceremony. They wanted to honor her and Mike for their actions on Flight 392. She almost declined. She didn't want attention or awards. But the airline insisted. They said it was important for other pilots to hear the story. To learn from it. To be inspired by it. So she agreed. The ceremony was held in a large hotel ballroom. Hundreds of pilots, flight attendants, and airline executives attended. Lisa felt uncomfortable in the spotlight. She wore her captain's uniform and stood backstage with Mike, waiting to be called. Nervous? Mike asked. Terrified, Lisa admitted. I'd rather fly through a thunderstorm than give a speech. Mike laughed. Same here. But I think people need to hear this story. It might help someone someday. When their names were called, they walked onto the stage together. The audience stood and applauded. The applause went on for what felt like forever. Lisa felt her cheeks flush. This was too much attention. The airline's CEO presented them with special commendations. He spoke about their professionalism, their teamwork, their dedication to safety. Then he asked Lisa to say a few words. She stepped to the microphone. Hundreds of faces looked up at her. She took a deep breath. Thank you for this honor, she began. But I want to be clear about something. What happened on Flight 392 wasn't about heroism. It was about training. It was about being ready. Mike and I both did what we were trained to do. Nothing more, nothing less. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Every pilot in this room has prepared for emergencies. You've practiced engine failures, system malfunctions, medical emergencies. You've spent hours in simulators, learning to handle situations you hope never to face in real life. That training matters. It saves lives. Not just on dramatic days like Flight 392, but every single day, in small ways you might never notice. The room was completely silent now. I was denied access to that cockpit at first. And rightly so. The security protocols that kept me out are there for good reasons. They protect everyone. But when those protocols needed to adapt for survival, they did. That flexibility, that ability to think beyond the rules when necessary, is just as important as following the rules. She looked at Mike, standing beside her. This young man saved Flight 392. He got us off the ground when his captain collapsed at the worst possible moment. He kept his head. He made the right decisions. He declared an emergency. He accepted help when it was offered. That's the mark of a great pilot. Not someone who never needs help, but someone who knows when to ask for it. Mike's eyes were wet. He nodded his thanks. Lisa turned back to the audience. So here's what I want you to take from this story. Stay ready. Keep training. Keep learning. Stay humble. And remember that we're all part of a team. When one of us is in trouble, the others step up. That's what makes aviation safe. Not individuals, but teams. Communities. People who care about each other and about bringing everyone home safely. She stepped back from the microphone. The applause erupted again, even louder than before. But this time, Lisa felt different about it. This wasn't about her. It was about everyone in that room. Every pilot who had ever trained for emergencies. Every flight attendant who had learned first aid. Every air traffic controller who had talked a pilot through a crisis. Every mechanic who had caught a problem before it became dangerous. They were all part of the same mission. To make flying safe. After the ceremony, dozens of people approached Lisa. Young pilots wanted advice. Experienced captains shared their own emergency stories. Flight attendants thanked her for highlighting their importance. Everyone had been touched by the story in some way. One young woman, a new first officer, said, "Captain Martinez, I hope if I'm ever in Mike's situation, I can handle it as well as he did." Lisa looked at her seriously. You will. Trust your training. Trust yourself. And don't be afraid to accept help when it's offered. As Lisa drove home that evening, she thought about the ceremony. About the speech she had given. About the young pilots she had met, all of them beginning their careers with hope and determination. Aviation was in good hands. The next generation was ready. They were training hard. Learning from stories like Flight 392. Preparing themselves for the challenges ahead. And somewhere, right now, a passenger was boarding a flight. Maybe that passenger was a pilot. Maybe someday, that pilot would be needed. Would step up. Would save lives. Because that's what pilots do. Lisa parked her car and walked into her house. Tomorrow, she would fly to Denver. Another routine flight. Another day of doing what she loved. And she would be ready, just like always. Ready for anything.